Well, I think the questions of everyone is why, right? A little more transparency. I'm certain the media has been privy to the same information that we've been privy to. The information of administrative issues of why he was terminated, the fact that he has been here less than 1 year, but there hasn't been a whole lot of detail. And I'm a very open and honest person. I understand there's some things that can't be said, but when we left to the information that has been shared, when we left to the things that the attorneys have put out for the excerpts of what was communicated by the village mayor, the village manager, when we're left with communications that were put out by the mayor, when we're left with communications that were put out by the deputy assistant village manager, none of those rise to the level of termination of a police chief. And I think that's what all the village residents are looking for, is how does this happen? A little more transparency. And without that, people are still showing up in the village meetings and seeking those questions, seeking those answers. We have a history in this country, and not just a past history, we even have a recent history, that there is an unfair treatment of African Americans, right? That African Americans are judged more harshly and suffer more severe consequences for same or lesser offenses than their white counterparts. And again, so without questions, those things, any conscious-minded individual has to put that in their thought process. Right? Are those things part of this decision? I think at least what has transpired here, it actually leaves the question is there some social conscious behavioral modification that needs to be addressed, right? If this isn't a implicit bias, racially motivated fire, from what has been shared, from what has been demonstrated, from what has been put out by the attorneys, by what has been put out by the village, it does lead to that we need to have some social conscious communication training to deal with these issues. I've been in this community over 20 years. I'm a single father. I've raised my kids in this community. I think this community is wonderful. But this is something that clearly needs to be addressed. And if you don't get in ahead of it, we end up with some of the issues that we see in other areas of our country.
Mr. Dorsey, your thoughts on the agenda tonight? It's a consideration for a resolution to vote on the chief's termination. What do you make of that after all of this has gone on? Is he fired? Is he not fired? What?
I think that leads to the confusion, right? It leads to the confusion of the residents saying, what's going on? I can imagine it leads to the confusion of Chief Jones as well. Am I the chief? Am I not the chief, right? But the wording, I hope that it leaves hope. I hope that we've left ourselves open to what I asked for the last Monday village meeting, was let's pump the brakes here, right? Let's see if we can actually do some damage control and resolve this without having, I only want you guys here in my community for our run the gym, right? The beautiful things that we do in Flossmoor. We don't want the advertisement for this. So this actually gives us an opportunity, from the way it was worded, it gives us an opportunity to do a little damage control and see if we can resolve this in the best light for the village and the best light for Chief Jones. Well, this is probably not going to be the popular response amongst people, but people who know me in this community know I don't care about the popular response. I don't think that's the case. No, I don't think that's the case. But when you don't have transparency in your communication, again, you open up the door for this type of rumor, this type of street communication, and quite frankly, I can see where they come from with it, right? When you have a history of always having to prove yourself, when you have the history of, there's two Americas. I just don't want there to be two Flossmoors, right? But I can see how people could feel that, because when you don't have that level of transparency, you just leave the door open for those type of speculations.
So, Mr. Dorsey, what are you all asking for tonight? Many of the residents are here. It sounds like you're asking for the police chief to be reinstated. You're asking for an apology, I've read, and then also for some action to be taken against the village manager.
Yeah, I'll speak for me. You know, I think the termination, based upon what has been shared, I think the termination of Chief Jones moved too quickly, right? I think people didn't pump the brakes and lay out all the odds and lay out all the pros and cons to this. I think that would be equally as problematic to double down and call for the termination of the village manager. Same scenario. Let's not move quick, all right? I don't, based upon what has been written, based upon what has been shared, I don't see that as a grounds for termination. Again, I think this is an opportunity for us to really have some education on how we relate to each other, which I think we do a really good job as a village. But we've had a hiccup here, and we have to be honest that let's pump the brakes. I don't think it was not. There's nothing that has been shared that says it rises to the level of a termination of a police chief, right? But I have to also say there's nothing that has been written that says it rises to the level of termination of anyone. You can't have one without the other. You can't support one that says this doesn't meet it for you, but this does. You know, as my mother used to say, two wrongs don't make a right.
All right, thank you.